Awesome. Well, thank you guys for doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
My pleasure. I like your guys' stuff a lot. It's funny. I shouldn't because I saw Breaking Upwards the day before someone broke up with me.
No.
So I sort of blame the movie for inspiring them.
Oh,
But at the same time, it's a good movie, so I can't really get that mad.
we're sorry.
Yeah. No, it was it. I remember being like, oh, let's go to the IFC Center and see this like super indie movie. I'm not going to tell you what it's about, and I know they sat there
Oh
going,
my God.
I'm responding to this in a way I does not realize. Um,
I'm
I
sorry. But it's look, that's probably was what was meant to be.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because normally I would ask people like, so what? How did you guys stay sane during quarantine and stuff? And you guys, made art. So put all of us to shame. At what point were you like, I'm bored, I should make a movie?
That's pretty early on. I don't know. After a few months of feeling depressed and sad and, going kind of crazy, we started to have a conversation about it, like, is this possible? Can we do this? Are we ready? We fought about it a little bit. And then, yeah, I think as artists, you feel the need to channel and express what's going on underneath the surface, and this was no exception. So we just decided, okay, what can we do with these circumstances that are so crazy? And obviously shoot outside because it's going to be too hard to do stuff inside most of the time. And then who do we know who's maybe going to be game for this? And some people were afraid, but a lot of people didn't have shit to do. So Zoe and I just started, wrestling with what we were going through and digging into, these conversations around the inner child, which we were interested in and working on in our own therapy sessions. And then the story was kind of born from there.
Cool. Yeah, it's something that it's so easy to make a movie like the quarantine movie or the movie that's too soon about something, and you just like feel it in the first minute. You're like, oh, this is what you're doing. But this was a really sort of ingenious way of not making a movie about the current time, but it clearly was like, okay, this is a movie that's being made now because look, we're outdoors and we're, all the things that you would, if it was about the thing, you would go, ugh, it's about the thing, and I don't want to know about the thing. I'm in the thing. So, like, at what point did you guys, when you figure out the story, go, okay, this works and doesn't feel like we're calling too much attention to it, and it's just a satisfying narrative as well?
I mean, yeah, I think it was by design that we wanted to create a story that could also be cathartic for us to be sort of working through the existential questions that we were facing at this very like singular moment in the history of the world, but without, as you said, locating it specifically in the pandemic, because we did not want to be watching things that were about the thing we were living in so specifically, but we wanted to, I guess, feel reflected emotionally in the things that we were watching. And I think tonally, both Daryl and I were like drawn to comedies that were also poignant and tender. And I think we tend to create the things that we want to be watching. So yeah, I mean, I think like creating a narrative around an apocalyptic atmosphere that was also sort of banal felt very similar to what we were living, but through sort of a comedic lens, and one where we could find some levity amidst the despair and uncertainty.
Yeah, and it works really well because, like you said, like it becomes like boring's the wrong word because you're like, oh, if I leave my house, I could die.
Yeah.
But you're also like, I think I'm now safe and I'm bored.
Yeah.
And I guess that's how like the apocalypse would be too. You're like, well, I'm gonna die, but I'm not gonna die in an exciting way. We're all going the same way. So what's on TV, or we'll sit outside, or like, I guess, what is the thing you want to be doing? And it's just funny how everyone kind of is handling it in a sort of realistic but heightened way. Like, it's always funny You know, it's like, oh look, here's Charlie Day. Oh look, here's all these actors, and you kind of are waiting for the funny thing, but it's all very like grounded in like, oh, if your funny friend wasn't crying, this is what they'd be doing when they're about to cry.
Yes, exactly. A lot of crystal for Charlie and Mary's characters, crystal healing and psychedelics.
Yeah. I mean, we basically said to all of our friends who were kind enough to be in the movie, like wherever you are emotionally on the day that we are shooting you is where your character is. And I think that was like also intentional in terms of the narrative that we created, because I think for so many of these actors, it was their first time on camera. So there was some trepidation around like, can I be funny right now? And I think we wanted to give them the freedom to be wherever they were. And because they're just inherently funny people, that was generally funny. But I think we wanted it to be grounded in like also the reality of what we were all living.
And it's such an interesting fine line too, because so many things that I guess, like, I won't say lesser movies, but other movies would be the biggest part of the movie, would be all those people. They'd be zany characters, and every third person would be like, come on, let's do an orgy, and like, oh, like it'd be funny, but it's funny that that's the grounded part of this movie. But then you also have the main character who's got a vision of her younger self following her around at the same time, and that's the heightened part. But that's treated also just like, this is what's happened. Everyone doesn't have their younger self following them around.
Yeah, totally.
It's yeah. I'm curious at what point you found that like, okay, here's the heightened part, here's the grounded part. This works, because like it could easily not.
I think early on we knew that Zoe's character couldn't just be by herself, because it would be boring watching her walk through the streets just alone for a while, and we didn't really want to come up with voiceover, but we liked the idea of her inner monologue and like the chatter that's in all of our minds about the self. And so it just made sense to us to create that kind of metaphysical cork. And then I think the like existential comedy that is coming through the characters just felt natural to the emotional landscape that, again, we were all living through, but the movie kind of was also trying to emulate.
Yeah, I mean, and that's I think a hallmark of all your guys' movies is like figuring shit out, like characters who need to figure shit out, and that's, I guess, probably it's really satisfying to see on screen when it's done well, but I think it's probably harder than you would think, just because sitting there going, oh my god, my life is not inherently cinematic, but you guys find a way to make it compelling, and there isn't really a question there beyond like, well, how do you do it? Like, Jesus, you're good at it.
Thank you. That's so nice. I mean, I think, yeah, like tone is always the like linchpin to I think figuring out the tone of a film is so important. And I think both Daryl and I, as viewers, are drawn to films that ride, I think, that are sort of like tonal mashups, in certain ways that can be irreverent, but also grounded, and that can be funny and have like, broadly swinging moments, but also poignant. And so I think as filmmakers, we try to achieve that same, intersection. And it is hard. It definitely is like a challenge. I think it obviously starts with the script and figuring out how to like dive into deep questions through an irreverent and comedic lens.
I think it's also just like Zoe and I's disposition to be like, we analyze things to death in our regular lives. So like we'll talk through something like way more than it needs to be talked through.
Yeah.
And sometimes that yields, positive results. And sometimes it's like, what, we didn't really need to discuss this at this length, but that's the neurotic, Jewish side to both of us.
Can relate. Probably why I'm like breaking up words, Lola verses, like these things are things that respond to me, because I'm like, oh, these are people figuring stuff out and doing it in a way that I think is really satisfying. So as we wrap up, I'm sure I'm not the only one today who's going to bother you. But since you guys have done mostly comedy, but then you guys have done drama, and Band-Aid for you was kind of more a little bit in between, like, is there a genre that you're thinking about eventually tackling? Obviously, this was, the world almost ended. Let's pivot. But at some point, is there another thing? Because like Zoe, you've done horror. Like, is there a thing you guys are thinking about eventually building up towards?
Interesting question. I we Zoe and I made one other straight drama, or it was like a political thriller.
Yeah.
And then I made like a straight drama set in Southside Chicago about the aftermath of a police shooting. So we haven't really delved into science fiction, and we haven't delved into like pure like fantasy. I don't know. I think like we love different genres, and it's really just about the story and who's gonna like let us make something in a different realm. It's tough. The industry does put you into a box in so many ways. So like, if you want to just go make something completely different, unless you're like Steven Soderbergh or the Coen brothers, it's tough to get them to take a shot. But it's not for lack of trying or wanting to have a desire to go make something wild. I don't know. Yeah, Zoe, what genre would you love to make something in that's so different from what you do?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, yeah, the Craft legacy was really different for me. So that was like a big swing. And Band-Aid was like a musical of sorts, but I think a bit, musicals are fun.
Yeah.
To do like a big musical.
Totally.
But
Yeah,
I think fantasy, like sci-fi fantasy, like a completely different universe would be fun to create.
I'd watch it. Listen, I know that they're like, can we give you no money and you make another comedy is kind of the vibe, but hopefully someone eventually goes the other way because, listen, I think you guys can do anything.
Well, there's like there's so many good examples of like comedies that are set in different genres, like Galaxy Quest. Like,
exactly.
I would love to make a film like Galaxy Quest. So we'll keep exploring. If you want to invest in the next project, that's a different genre. We'll send you our Venmo.
Yeah, every bit I had went to Springsteen on Broadway. Sorry, poor writer. But this was amazing. Thank you so much. And like I said, I really did enjoy the movie. So it was.
Thanks.
I saw it at Sundance when I was like, oh god, everything sucks. So it was great to feel that for like 90 minutes.
Thanks so much, man.
So much.
Thank you guys for doing this.
All right, take care.
Awesome.